There once was a guy living in our neighborhood named Jimmy. He got picked on a lot for being confident and a funny guy. His mouth tendered to get him in a lot of trouble and seldom learned him a lesson. He was just very confident with who he was and refused to change it. When people asked him why he let them wail on him for his blunt comedy and wisecracks, he'd snark and say, "Honesty is the best policy. At least they're not hiding anything from me, neither am I from them." As one of the kids inventedly pissed off with a rather crude MILF joke, was something a psychopathic with sadistic streak, who didn't take kindly to the insult, so he rounded up the other guys who didn't like Jimmy, and they cornered him after school in the science room. "Your mouth got you into this, but I want you to remember, Brett the ringleader," told him as he looked in Jimmy's terrified eyes. They grabbed some formic acid in the lab and threw it in his face. They stood around watching him scream in agony as it ate through his flesh before sniggering and running out, pretending to be concerned and waiting to help him. The paramedics arrived and attended... When the paramedics arrived and were attended to Jimmy, who was no longer able to scream, the principal asked the boys if they knew what happened. The leader, Brett, explained they were walking past when they saw Jimmy skulking around this lab room. By the time they got there, he was already in that state. The other members joined and backed Brett up with other fake details as Jimmy tried to protest in silent agony. The principal nodded and told them he would speak to them after he had a word with Jimmy and gotten his side of the story after he was out of the hospital. A few days passed. Jimmy's kept in an intensive care unit with bandages on his face. The doctors salvaging what little they could of his face, his vision still intact in one eye, his jaw withstanding dispute of loss of flesh. He was still unable to speak and refused to respond to anybody. He just sat there, eyes unblinking, staring at the ceiling, bloodshot and filled with amnesty. When he was discharged sometimes later, he would not respond to anything, or with anything other than the words liars. His social life gone, unable to smile or even crack a joke anymore. He secluded himself in the room and began playing. Sick, vindictive thoughts started appearing in his mind. He would get them all, one by one, decimate them, slice them, burn them. He waited patiently until the group would be vulnerable. Late at night, when they said goodbyes and went home separately, that's when he would strike. That weekend, Brett received a package in the mail. Curiously, he opened it to find a VHS tape with the word liars. No, not the word liars, but the word for you. Attached crudely onto the front. He put it in and played it. It was a crudely recorded home video by an unknown cameraman who didn't speak at all for the duration of the film. It began with the camera pointing at the date of the newspaper. It was yesterday. He zoomed out. You could see it was in a basement, a single flickering light bulb hanging above and casting unformable scene. By the time he completely zoomed out, it was apparent that this was no normal video. In front of the cameraman, on his hands and knees, were one of Brett's friends. He was naked, a dirty blindfold around his face, and a crude gag in his mouth. He was covered in blood, horrific burns, I don't know how to say that word, and wounds. One particularly large one on his back stood out that almost looked like a word. The cameraman, with his gloves on, took the gag out of the crying boy's mouth, and immediately he begged to go home. Please, oh, let me go. I did what you wanted. Jesse, Mike, Keith, you made me butcher them. I want to go home, man. Please, I'm sorry, you guys. I'm so sorry. He kept repeating it over and over again, rocking back and forth as he did so. Brett's legs began to shake as he felt the bile rise to his stomach. He could see the burned, mangled bodies in the background, the bodies of his friends. Crap, I left my spot. All of them have markings in their bodies in deep, large cuts. The cameraman reached out for the boy's chin and lifted up, encouraging him to stand. So he did so obediently, as he was slowly led to a door off-screen whimpering. Brett can see what had been cut into his friend's back now is the word liar. The camera cuts out temporarily. When it restarts again, they were no longer inside. They were instead out in a cold snow in the outskirts of the wood. And it didn't appear to be the original man holding the camera anymore. It was Brett's friend. Whimpering and shivering as he holds the camera in place for 30 seconds. In one place for 30 seconds, pointing at some trees in the distance, hearing footsteps. Draw ever nearer. Where are you, man? You said I could go, man. You said I could go. The boy is screaming and crying, frightened out of his mind, as the sound of crunching snow draws near from seemingly every angle. It stops. He turns around to see the mangled face of Jimmy. A horrifying howl blares through the speakers of the word liars. Appearing before the tape abruptly stops. Brett feels faint and dark to lock the front door, knowing what's coming. As he turns to run for it, he immediately hits something and falls backwards. The last thing he ever hears is liars as acid runs down his face and begins to slowly eat away his flesh. The last thing he ever sees is Jimmy's face, turning into a sick, twisted smile. This is the last known image of Jimmy.